Hello, I'm Marcus Buckland, formerly of Sky Sports, and now one of the two main tennis presenters on Amazon Prime Video. And it's my pleasure to welcome you to this Business of Tennis webinar presented by the Tennis Industry Association UK. TIA UK is the not-for-profit members trade organisation bringing together companies, clubs and individuals with business interests in UK tennis. Now, I would normally be introducing this topic live from the All England Club, but because of COVID-19, the TIA UK has converted its annual Business of Tennis Forum into a series of webinars aimed to help tennis club businesses grow and be more profitable. The series of webinars is sponsored by BLM, the TIA UK's legal partner, and is supported by the LTA. Now, the webinar topics focus on some key business issues affecting clubs and operators of tennis venues, illustrate best practice, and how clubs can maximize opportunities to grow and increase revenue. Of course, we are living in strange times and there are plenty of challenges ahead, but there's also a lot of support from the governing body and others such as TIA UK to help get tennis clubs back on track. The good news is that you don't need to take any notes because a copy of this webinar will be available on the TIA UK website. The webinar is pre-recorded, but you can send any questions to the email given at the end of the webinar and you'll be answered just as quickly as possible. We sincerely hope that you find this interesting, informative and forward-thinking. Thank you very much.
This webinar is a joint effort by the TIA UK and the LTA looking at the business health of tennis clubs. The LTA has produced some new research into clubs following lockdown 1, which suggests that tennis has not been as badly affected as other sports. Indeed, there is good evidence that clubs have gained new members as a result of restrictions placed on other sports, but also because the tennis club offer is becoming more attractive. The TIA looks at the larger clubs in particular and highlights findings from 2 years of research into some key business issues that impact upon club financial sustainability and growth. This research was undertaken prior to lockdown 1, but it does deliver some interesting initial data for clubs wishing to maximise opportunities once things become more normalised. First, we hear from the LTA.
Just to introduce myself, I'm Nick White. I'm the Senior Insight Manager at the LTA, and I lead the research function, covering participation work, event development, and then a lot focused around workforce, be it club health, volunteer or coaches. Over the course of the next few slides, I'm going to take you through some of the findings that we have found over recent months from participation work, but then also club findings, just to see how it differs between the different club sizes, and hopefully provide you with some useful information for you to go away with and action. But to start with, I want to highlight how we collect this data. And what I want to show here is actually the participation tracker we outsource to an agency. This receives 1,650 people each month who are 14 plus, and it's nationally representative when it comes to age, gender, region and social grade. And the workforce surveys, so clubs, coaching and volunteers, that's all carried out in-house. Clubs and volunteers, we would send to a quarter of the sample each month and do a deep dive every three times a year. And for coaching, we would send out a survey to half the audience each quarter and do a deep dive twice a year. This allows us to identify how healthy clubs are, what support they receive, what support they want to receive going forward. And for volunteers and coaches, really understand how valued they feel in their role and how valued they feel by the LTA as well. So we can really provide our support and make them feel more valued going forward. So to start with, I wanted to provide a bit more information around where we are when it comes to participation. And the positive thing is that if we look at yearly play, which is those that have played at least once in the past 12 months, and monthly play, which is those that have taken part at least once in the last 4 weeks, yearly play, we're actually up 6% year on year. And this is really positive given that we're in a COVID year. But even more impressive is the fact that we have remained equal year on year for those that are playing at least once in the last 4 weeks. The important message here is actually that we have this larger group of people within tennis, but we really need to work to keep them in the sport. So whilst the LTA are looking into initiatives about how to retain people playing tennis, it's also important that clubs really consider different areas to really encourage people to keep interested in tennis. Because it's also been shown that those that lapse are those that have started to play in summer months but then lose interest within the winter. So what are we going to do as a tennis population to really attract people to continue playing the sport in those winter months? But that really gives some context around the amount of people that are playing, and that moves quite nicely into where we are with club members. So if we look at, so this is taken from the Club Health Survey, and if we look at the average number of junior and adult members that clubs say they have in within the numbers within their clubs, we can see that on a total level there are 62 average junior members within each club and 124 average number of adults in each club. This obviously starts small with small clubs, which is those with 1 to 3 courts, and then starts to grow between medium clubs, which is those that have between 4 and 7 courts, and large clubs that have 8+ courts. And the size of club, size of members tends to double as you move up that gradient. If we look at the differences between the start of this year versus where we are now, we can see that adult membership has risen for small clubs and medium clubs, but there is slight issue here with larger clubs. So junior membership's slightly fallen, and actually adult members has slightly fallen as well at the moment. However, there isn't too much of concern with the sizes at the moment, because as what I'll show you in a couple of slides time, is that there are more people interested in joining. So as I said, the sizes have slightly fallen, but there isn't too much of an issue. And that's because on the whole, every club size has seen growth in new membership. So focusing on large clubs here, 86% of large clubs have seen an increase in new members. Where there is a slight discrepancy here is actually within existing members, and large clubs, 50% of large clubs say the number of existing members has stayed the same, but 42% have said they've actually declined. So there's a piece here around retaining your existing members, but also the acquisition is doing quite well at the moment. But where the concern isn't necessarily sitting at the moment is actually because large clubs are seeing a lot more prospective members looking to join, and so that may end up replacing the existing members that are falling out. So yes, there needs to be a retention strategy to keep that existing members, because then you can have a more positive flow of members within your club. But as I say, there's a greater interest, so the concern isn't as high as it could be. So outside of membership size and average number of members, within the Club Health Survey, we also ask how healthy a club is, and that considers 5 different factors: membership growth, membership retention, court and programme utilisation, financial stability, and governance and management. And what we ask clubs to do is rate how healthy they feel on a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 is not healthy at all and 5 is very healthy, for these individual measures. And then we provide a mean score, which is on average where they fall within that scale. What we can see is actually membership growth and membership retention has improved in its health across the year, and that is because there's more people interested in the sport, but then also more new members are coming to clubs. So it's a really positive shift within that. And that will also be improving court and programme utilisation. What we can see is medium-sized clubs did see the largest growth in membership size, and this is why their health score is actually higher than other size clubs. But large clubs are largely quite high on these different measures. And then just to highlight the priorities as well for large clubs going forward, as we've seen, there has been quite a growth in these measures, but with the volume of people coming into the sport, they will all large, and some clubs seeing a decrease in the number of members within them, there is a priority to once again grow their membership and also retain them going forward. So it is on people's radars that they need to keep those members within the clubs. But outside the large clubs, I also wanted to provide some element of comparison of the other sizes as well. So if we look at small clubs, membership retention and growth is still there as the top two, but within medium-sized clubs, facility development comes in there. And that's also actually quite important for larger clubs as well, because they want to provide a better experience for their members. So whether it's redeveloping their clubhouse or resurfacing courts or even implementing floodlights, it's just about allowing people to build that experience or play more regularly at different times of the year as well. So floodlights help when it gets dark in the winter, but then also having a artificial clay court means that people can play all year round if it's raining as well. So whilst I haven't mentioned it within the key priorities in the next 6 months, it is important to mention that whilst it's not within the top 3, workforce development is still a very high priority within clubs' mindset. And that feeds into why we also do wider workforce surveys, because we really want to get an idea of how we can support clubs to really engage their workforce as well. And so what we see from a volunteer and coach point of view is actually the volunteers and coaches enjoy being in their role and they're likely to consider continuing. However, where there is a slight issue at the moment is how valued they feel within their role by ultimately their member and their members and the venue and club. So here we can see that 46% of volunteers feel valued by their venue, and 54% of coaches feel very valued by their venue as well. So what really needs to happen here, or start to happen more frequently, is for the workforce to be better appreciated by their club and their member base, either recognizing them more frequently or giving them an extra say within the committee, or helping really develop their experience and within the club itself. And then finally, just to look into the future as well. So and an element around financial stability, because we are in times that have been challenging, and we have, as a sport, we have been closed for 2 months, well, 3 months now due to the second lockdown. And this has generated some concerns as clubs, and particularly large clubs, just a bit fearful and uncertain of what the future holds, because they don't know whether we're going to be in another lockdown, or whether COVID's going to come back, or whether there's going to be an extra income stream. So there's just that concern as well, and these lockdowns make the clubs close, and there's just no income coming in. But also the fact that a larger club will also have other areas of income that may be impacted more severely than tennis. So if that's more impacted more severely, will a club close completely? So there are concerns on that side of financial stability. However, the positive aspect is the fact that clubs are actually largely positive about what the future holds, because they have seen this increase in people wanting to get coaching, this increase in people paying, and also more people coming into clubs and signing on for those membership fees. So they have seen the growth that can happen off the back of COVID and the interest in the sport. So it really has helped recover and also grow some clubs. So there is positive around that. But outside of the generic tennis, there's also other income streams. So that could include bars and restaurants within the clubs. And that has also helped to kind of keep the finances going whilst there has been a loss in certain areas. So that was almost like a whistle-stop tour of some of the insight that we found, and I hope you found it really useful. I'm just going to now hand back over to Phil to carry on the webinar and feed in some of the broader findings that he's received from the larger clubs as well.
Hi, I'm Phil Sandilands, Business Development Manager at the TIA UK. Following on from Nick's excellent presentation, I wanted to bring you up to speed with the TIA's own tennis club business survey to give you some additional insight and to help assess your club or venue's business performance and perhaps identify some areas that could be more profitable. The data that follows was collated over 2 years, importantly before the onset of COVID-19. But even so, we think that this will be of interest to all clubs. The idea behind the project is to try and benchmark the performance of tennis clubs, primarily focusing on some of the key operational aspects outside of the tennis activity itself. By assisting clubs to identify factors that impact sustainability and growth, we believe that this helps provide the platform to grow tennis activity further and, of course, make the club more sustainable financially. This is a 5-year project that uses an online survey. Our target is to have 100 clubs participating in the project by the 5th year. Some of the most well-known tennis clubs around the country have participated, but we need many more clubs to be involved so that measurements become more powerful over time. The focus of the project is on large clubs. However, of course, there is much variance between large clubs in terms of membership numbers, scope of facilities, range of services and sports offered. And so it's not yet possible to develop a set of simple benchmarks at this stage of the project. However, we are working closely with the LTA and have now aligned ourselves with the LTA's categorization of large clubs as those with 8 or more tennis courts. Of the 3,000 registered clubs in GB, 435 are large clubs using this categorization, and it's for this group that the project has been designed, primarily because they are more likely to offer more in terms of facilities, services and increasing commerciality, which is the focus of the work. However, the first thing to say is that the data gathered is only from a small cohort of 23 large and very varied clubs, hence benchmarking at this stage of the project is not yet feasible. We need to double the number to progress towards this, and so we hope this webinar will encourage your club to take part next year. So the information we're delivering today will, we hope, be of interest generally and identify some themes to take away. Whilst the number of clubs involved is modest, they collectively represent some 25,000 tennis players and have a combined asset value of over £65 million. Due to the wide variance in the club offerings, turnover of those surveyed is also wide, from less than £250,000 to over £10 million per year. The mix of members reflects the national tennis club scene, with 13% of members being new and clubs assessing that 7% are possibly at risk of not renewing next year due to various factors, such as moving away from the area or frequency of play has declined. You will note that the average adult fee is high at just under £1,000, but you need to bear in mind that this cohort of clubs includes half a dozen of the largest and most prestigious tennis clubs in Britain, which obviously screws upwards the results. The good news is that over the last 2 years, prior of course to March this year, tennis activity has either grown or remained the same. This is also reflected in the LTA survey covering all tennis clubs. The highest growth has been in adult male and female tennis and in mini tennis. The lowest take-up has been in senior tennis, family programs, and in disability tennis. As stated, the scope of facilities and activities offered vary greatly in this first wave of clubs surveyed. Obviously, all 23 clubs have outdoor courts and all have a bar or indeed multiple bars. 16 clubs offer indoor tennis and dedicated gyms. Only 2 of the clubs currently have paddle courts, although a number are investing in paddle in the near future. However, most clubs have some or good potential for further site development, and going forward, works are being planned to include clubhouse modernisation, floodlighting improvements, and seasonal covered courts. The tennis facilities at the 23 clubs equate to an average of 14 outdoor and 3 indoor courts per site. Many tennis clubs have had gyms within their clubs for many years, and fitness has become such an important earner to underpin and support the delivery of tennis. 16 out of the 23 clubs have full dedicated gyms with 30 stations on average per gym. Fitness-only members average 275 per club, paying on average £56 a month. So that brings in just under £200,000 gross per year per club, showing how important fitness is. Most of the clubs were planning to invest in either equipment or the facility, or both, in the next 2 years. Interestingly, there appears to be good potential to upsell fitness programs for tennis players, as these only make up 25% or less of the regular gym users. Food and beverage offers are similarly varied across the clubs, so it's not easy to gauge how successful this area of operations is within a tennis club setting. However, clubs are considering a wide range of measures to increase profitability, including refurbishment, changing and extending opening hours, more focus on reducing wastage, and upskilling catering staff. The majority of clubs operate this service in-house. 16 clubs have dedicated retail outlets, but most are modest in floor space. While 2 clubs make a significant profit from this service, most either make a modest profit or break even. Most are operated by reception or admin staff, but some are operated by coaches or, less likely, by local retailers under contract. All clubs appear to hold a complete range of products, with club-branded clothing being a strong seller, and 5 clubs have an exclusive arrangement with a racket brand. Floor space availability and best location in terms of footfall somewhat limits potential improvement in the retail service, but clubs are considering changes to improve profitability, including introducing online selling and workforce training, amongst other factors. As expected, the larger the club, the more paid staff is required. Conversely, the smaller the club and scope of facilities, the more reliance there is on volunteers. The survey results show that those clubs with less than 1,000 members rely heavily on volunteers, some 60% of its workforce, whereas those with more than 2,000 members, 7% of its workforce is volunteers. Tennis coaches are a mixture of employed and self-employed, and the theme over the 2 reports is the difficulty some clubs have over recruiting the right coaches for their needs. This is less so for admin and managerial staff, but in some instances this was an issue. Given the complexities of employment law, many of the clubs use external companies to deal with HR and employment issues, but most offer professional training for employees in-house as deemed necessary and undertake staff satisfaction surveys on a regular basis. Grounds management is seen as a priority, even for those clubs that have low maintenance courts, and the majority have had someone in the role of a head grounds person for a number of years. Across the clubs surveyed, some 94% of the grounds staff are on the club payroll. As stated, the small number of clubs involved in the project so far and the wide variance in what they offer makes benchmarking unrealistic, and so the expenditure ratios illustrated cannot be used as key metrics for like comparisons. However, for interest, clubs have provided an assessment in 4 key areas. In terms of staff costs as a percentage of total operating costs, there is an obvious difference between those that rely heavily on volunteers, so staff cost is only 10% of operating costs in these instances, against those that require paid staff to run operations, so it's nearly 40% of total operating costs. Looking at energy costs versus total revenue, obviously this is going to be at a much higher percentage the larger the club gets. So 20% energy costs for clubs with 4,000 members reduces to 6% for clubs with 1,000 and less members. Maintenance is set at 10% of total revenue across the clubs, although more detail is required on how this element has been scoped. But marketing is very modest against total revenue at only 2%. It could be that the nature of the club and its position with the local community is well established. However, this is still very modest against any standards for the leisure industry. Obviously, asking the question about threats and opportunities may well elicit very different responses now than they did 12 months ago. But here are some of the key issues reported. In terms of threats, there's a lack of flexibility over making improvements to their internal club layout, of accessing capital for facility improvements, of increasing utility and staff costs, of increased local competition, more from gyms and food outlets than on the tennis impact. We hear, as we've mentioned, about some issues regarding tennis coaches and also resistance from members to price increases. However, there are also some strong opportunities, finding ways to enhance the club's gym offer, strengthening the tennis coaching programs, finding ways to reduce utility costs, introducing paddle and improving marketing, enhancing what the club does in terms of delivery tennis in parks and schools, and of course, upgrading their own on-site facilities. All in all, clubs feel positive or very positive about the future, and this is reflected in the LTA's largest survey of all the tennis clubs, although this of course was before lockdown 1. Although the data provided is from a modest number of large clubs, you found it of interest and helpful to your own club business. We are working closely with the LTA on the detail and content of the next survey, but for obvious reasons, the launch of this has been delayed, and we hope to have this available online in the spring. For the 2021 report, we are of course keen to get as many of the clubs with 8 or more courts as possible to be involved in the project, and we will be sending out an invitation to participate to those 400 plus clubs in the new year. In the meantime, if you would like a hard copy of the 2020 report, contact me at phil@tiauk.org, or you can download the report from the TIA UK website, www.tiauk.org. Thanks for watching, and we hope that your club recovers strongly from the current restrictions, and wish your club and your business every success in 2021.
Well, we very much hope that you found this webinar of interest to your own business. Tennis has been more fortunate than some other sports in being able to get back to some sort of normality at a relatively early stage, and many clubs have recorded an increase in interest and membership during the pandemic, which of course is encouraging for the industry as a whole. From my own personal point of view, Prime Video were thrilled by the number of people who watched the Battle of the Brits at the NTC during the summer, then the Cincinnati event, which of course took place in New York, the US Open itself, and most recently the Italian Open in Rome. If you want to ask a question in relation to the contents of this webinar, you can email phil@tiauk.org. That's phil@tiauk.org, and you will receive a response shortly afterwards. Details of other webinars and information on the TIA UK can be found on the website tiauk.org. And that is it. Thank you very much for watching.